relationships that are built on envy and fear and domination and mistrust? Why do we kill and destroy one another? Why does everything feel so broken? These are the tensions that Genesis holds in its stories. These are the questions that it seeks to answer. And it doesn't always answer them definitively. It holds them as questions. Genesis sets up this narrative with three kind of major players in the story. You have creation, humanity, and God. And humans in the story work to undo creation while God seeks to preserve it. And it's this interplay between those two groups, God and humans, that really these first chapters of Genesis highlight for us. And so we look today at a few chapters actually, that ask the question, will everything be okay? Will evil and chaos dominate over peace and order? Who will win? The forces that seek death and destruction and chaos, or the forces that seek life and flourishing? And so we see God and humans caught up in that struggle, in that story. And they're both playing an important part and forcing the other one's hand in this creation project. Now, this narrative, as I've said before, is very different from others in its time that's like it. Every old story has the idea of humans struggling with gods, right? Like the Greek heroes, Hercules, Achilles. We're all familiar with someone who's fighting, trying to struggle against the gods, and the gods are struggling back, trying to win dominance over creation. But the difference in Genesis is God is not struggling, is not in this dynamic relationship with humans because he's trying to get his way just because he wants it arbitrarily. He's the defender of creation. He's trying to preserve the order, the peace, the beauty, and the love of creation. And he's trying to prevent humans from wiping themselves and the creation around them out. So that's what we're going to look at today. Will chaos and violence that come from humans win, or will order and peace that come from God win? It starts with the building up of a civilization, and it ends with a bunch of water. And we'll learn a little something about God along the way today. Because if you remember, I've said that Genesis is the origin story for Israel. As Israel looks around at its world and it sees everything around it, the empires, the struggle to make bread from the soil, the pain of childbirth, its own place as a nation in the world, it seeks to answer, how did everything come to be? And that includes God. That includes their relationship with God, the way they conceive of God. How did God come to be? And as we'll see in this flood story, it is as much a story of God as it is a story of humanity. It delves into the very emotion of God and demonstrates a dramatic change in the life of God. So our journey is going to take us through the flood story today. The story moves by highlighting humanity's corruption as image bearers, God's pain, God's memory, and humanity's dignity restored. And as we close, we'll draw a message of hope from this text that possibly you haven't thought of before or connected to the flood. Because it doesn't always seem like a hopeful story, does it? The world's destroyed. The text says everything that has the breath of life in it will die. How is that a story of hope? How is that a message of hope in any way? This is one of these stories that a lot of people have problems with. When you're talking to people, and people who have a problem with Christianity, which is a lot of people, a lot of times the flood story comes up. Why would you ever be a part of a religion where God just flips out over some people doing some stuff and destroys everything? Not just like the people that were doing the bad stuff, but like the kids and the sheep and the, bird. Like, what did the birds do? That's just stupid, right? Like, none of us enjoy hanging out with the people who play the board game and as things go wrong, flip it. You know, have you ever been in that situation? Maybe you're playing a board game with a child or with a really intense adult. Like I think Monopoly is one of these games. I hear Ticket to Ride is one of these games where you can get so into it, so angry, right? The person puts that last piece. Maybe someone lands on Boardwalk and you had Park Place and you could have, like, that next roll could have put you in there. The money flies everywhere and, like, flutters to the ground. The pieces, the houses scatter. And the other person's just sitting there like, you ruined the game. Nobody likes the person that throws the chessboard. Nobody likes the person that throws the Monopoly board. It's immature. As an adult human citizen of the world, you're expected to control your emotions. You're expected to not freak out about something. You're expected to not retaliate out of kind, to not escalate things with other people in your relationships. So why can God do it? These are the questions people ask when they read this flood story. And they're good questions. And as we'll see, this story is much more than just a God losing his temper and throwing the Monopoly board. So we're going to begin with the story. And it begins with this account, this genealogy of Adam's line. I'll read a little bit. We'll skip some of it. No one likes to read a whole entire genealogies. But we are going to make some points from it, so I'll just skip and choose and, be all over the place. It starts by saying, when God created humankind, he made them in the likeness of God. He created them male and female and blessed them and named them humanity when they were created. When Adam had lived 130 years, he had a son in his own likeness, in his own image, and he named him Seth, etc., etc., etc. We get to this guy named Enoch. Enoch has someone named Methuselah. Methuselah birthed somebody named Lamech. And Lamech has a son named Noah and says, he will comfort us in the labor and painful toil of our hands caused by the ground the Lord has cursed. So we have this long line, and obviously the point of this genealogy is to move us from Adam to this next story. It's like a fast forward button. As they're reading the account, you can't go through all these years of history. The main things are creation, flood. How do we get there? Here's a genealogy that connects Adam to Noah. We get to Noah, the important person, the person who's going to take it to the next level with humanity. And we see that his father calls him the person who will reverse the curse of the ground. This thing in Genesis 3 is still hanging with us. This idea that humanity is forced to be in the bondage of the yoke of grain. But Noah will deliver them from the curse. Now, before we move on, I want to point something out. Because the obvious reason, as I said, is connect Noah to Adam to move the story along. But there's things that you can pull out of these genealogies that are pretty cool. And one of the things really fits into the things we're going to talk about today. So, the next passage is about Noah and the one who lives through the flood and all of that stuff. But before we do that, I want to go back a previous chapter. There's another genealogy before this one, and it's a genealogy of Cain. It's Cain's descendants. And if you remember last week, the story of Cain, kills his brother, cursed by God, allowed to live, goes and starts civilizations. So it kind of tracks that. And the text says that Cain made love to his wife. She became pregnant, gave birth to Enoch. Enoch had someone named Mehujael. Mehujael had Methushael, and Methushael fathered Lamech. Lamech married 2 women, etc., and he gave birth to 2 sons. One is the father of all who played stringed instruments and pipes, and one is the father of those who live in tents and raise livestock. His other wife Zillah had a son, Tubal-Cain, who forged all kinds of tools out of bronze and iron, and Tubal-Cain's sister was Naamah. And Lamech said to his wives, Ada, Zillah, listen to me. Hear my words. I've killed a man just for wounding me, a young man for injuring me. If Cain is avenged 7 times, Lamech will be avenged 70 times 7. So a couple things to know. Do you hear any similarities between the 2 genealogies? They kind of flow the same way. Someone named Enoch has a son named Methuselah or Methusahel, and then that person has a son named Lamech. Like, they flow the same way, the same names. So what is the two Lamech thing? It's interesting here that Lamech is said, the first Lamech, Cain's descendant Lamech, is said to have been the father of those who play stringed instruments, music, art, those who forge iron tools, technology, those who raise livestock and travel in tents. And his daughter was named Naamah, which means beauty. So here this man Lamech is the father of beauty, is the father of productivity, is the father of technology, is the father of arts. But he's also the father of escalated violence, isn't he? My grandfather Cain killed a man. I'll kill everyone in the whole village. Lamech is an enigma. Lamech is not black and white. Lamech is gray. And what we see in all these genealogies, any genealogy, including the genealogy of Jesus, is that things are never as neat and tidy in life as we'd like them to be. There's complexity to life. There's people who do really bad things, but also did really good things. And so to read the Bible and to just put things in categories is a dangerous game to play, because if we lose the nuance, we're going to end up with weird ideas. Don't write someone off in your life if they've done something wrong to you, if you think they're living the wrong kind of lifestyle, because they may be the father or mother of productivity, technology, beauty, and art. There's complexity, and out of pain can come beauty and life. And this is something we'll see in the rest of the flood story. The second Lamech highlights this tension. We have the first Lamech, who, yes, was the father of all these great things, also was the father of violence. And the second Lamech says, my son Noah will rescue us from all of this, will bring us out of this cursed earth. This theme is all throughout the Bible, that in the midst of chaos, life can spring up. In the midst of what you might think is destruction and violence, there is still beauty and life to be found. So back to the story. We see this family tree. We see that it ends with this guy named Noah. So let's get back to the narrative. The next chapter begins by saying, when human beings began to increase in number on the earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit will not contend with humans forever, for they are mortal. Their days will be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days. The Nephilim? And also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. Then the Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of human heart was only evil all the time. So the Lord regretted he had made the human beings, and his heart was deeply troubled. So the Lord said, I will wipe from the face of the earth the human race I have created, and with them the animals and the birds and the creatures that move along the ground, for I regret that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. What is happening in this story? The sons of God having children by the daughters of men and birthing giant war heroes? That's weird, isn't it? Certainly. If you don't think it's weird, I don't know. It's weird. Giant race of war heroes. Because some sort of divine being mated with a human woman. It's pretty interesting. It's fun stuff. But what's happening here for us, right? Because however this story came to be, if you read Jewish literature from later, there's all kinds of mythologies that are built around this idea of divine beings impregnating human women. Some of the apocryphal books talk about it. But for our story today, how does it influence the flood? What's happening? What's the connection here between the sons of God impregnating daughters of men and suddenly the wickedness is out of control? There's this narrative developing in Genesis. It starts in chapter 3, where Adam and Eve say, I want to be like God. I want to grasp for something more than I have right now. And so the fruit will make me wise, right? It will make me like God. It will give me knowledge I don't have. And then you see the gods and humanity blending together in an unnatural way, right? Like, you don't see apes mating with giraffes, and you don't see like horses mating with pigs. Gods don't mate with humans. It's the same thing, reaching for something more than we have, making deals with the powers that be that will bring us things we thought we wanted. We see it again in the Tower of Babel story. We want to bring heaven and earth together, so we'll build it through power, through might, through centralized human government. We can be powerful. The story of this theme of becoming like God through power and might and destruction and violence is all throughout the Bible. And this story is no different. It's the same thing. Humanity trying to become more than it is through power, through the grasping of power. But that won't ever work. It's only destructive. When humans try to act like God, it usually means for us like to be all powerful, to have all knowledge, to have all wisdom, to have everything under our control. But that's not actually what God is. And that's why it's such a corruption to seek for power. Think about the one who did successfully bring humanity and divinity into one body. He did not consider equality with God something to be grasped. Rather made himself nothing and took the nature of a servant, and being found in human form humbled himself to death, even death on a cross. Therefore, God exalted him to the highest place and gave him a name above every name. Do you want to be exalted? Do you want to be like God? Well, being like God means giving things up, sacrificing, not grasping for more power, not reaching for wisdom, not filling yourself with something that you think you're lacking. Being like God is letting go, serving, loving, emptying yourself of your power. The right you think you may be able to claim, giving it up for the good of somebody else. That's the only way to achieve divinity. So we have this group of humanity who's seeking power and destruction, and it ends with all kinds of violence. Because of course it does, right? When you seek more power and you're grasping for more, if someone threatens it, you take them out. It's just the natural way grasping for power works. And so we see in the text again that God looks down and he sees the humans and he says that their corruption has reached like max level. And he says their violence is out of control. And he tells Noah to build an ark. Now, there's another story about a flood. And a man who was to build an ark and to take 2 of every kind of animal into the ark. It's the story of a man named Atrahasis. And in this story, instead of God seeing the violence of humanity, the very fact that they were threatening to wipe themselves out, to destroy not only themselves but the creation around them through grasping for more and more power. In the Atrahasis story, God wants to kill the humans because they're too loud. He can't get any sleep. Humans are created to work the ground. And they thought it was a great idea because they were kicking back and relaxing while they grew all the wheat. But as they overpopulated and became noisy and had their human parties, the gods couldn't sleep. And they said, the whole point of this was that we didn't have to work anymore, and now all we do is listen to them make their noise. Let's send a flood and wipe them all out. It's quite a different take to say, the only thing they're doing is undoing creation. I want the best for them and for creation. And they're undoing that best and seeking its worst. This is why the God of the Bible sends the flood. Human corruption, human violence, the grasping for things that are out of our control, the seeking of fame and satisfaction that spiral into violent destruction. And God here says this isn't how creation is supposed to work. And if you're working against everything that's good and beautiful, we might as well start over. But here's the thing, even that could be seen as like an overreaction, right? You know what? It's like a parent. I'll give you something to cry about. You ever heard that? Like the kids crying, I'll give you something to cry about. You know? Is that what this is? Like, oh, you want to destroy the world? I'll destroy the world. I'll do it if you want to do it. There's no sense here of that from God. When the text says that his heart was troubled, the word troubled is the same word used when it says that Eve will have pain in childbearing. God's heart is in pain. The pain of labor. The pain that says, this is the hardest thing I'm ever going to have to do. And I hope that it works out for the best. Turmoil, doubt, fear. These are emotions we see in the story of God here. It's not typically emotions we think about from God. Regret? I regret making humans. My heart is broken because of the state of creation. But that's what's happening. He's not flipping the Monopoly board. He's crying over the state of affairs. And so the flood comes. Chaos rules the day. Creation is uncreated. The waters that were separated as the Spirit hovered crashed back over the land. And everything is dark. And Noah and his family sit day after day and month after month in an ark in the chaos with nothing around them, no prospects ahead of them, as good as dead, hanging on in a lifeless scene. Have you ever felt that way? Have you ever felt that there's no sense of direction, that you're drowning, that you're sinking, that you don't know which way is up? That you're just floating in water that's so remarkably deep and you can't possibly swim out, and the only thing holding you is an ark that if it sinks, you're done. Humanity's corruption, God's pain, and God's memory. The next thing that happens, we're told, is that God remembered Noah. After a few months of this flood business, God remembered Noah, took thought of Noah, took thought of his creation. And upon this memory, the Spirit comes back through the waters, just like in Genesis 1. They recede, dry land appears, and Noah and his family are saved. And the really interesting thing about the story, and the whole point of it, the thing that can speak to us in deep ways, is that as they're celebrating and thanking God for bringing them safely through the flood, God says, never again will I curse the ground because of humans, even though every inclination of the human heart is evil. And never again will I destroy all living creatures as I have done. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease. That's an interesting thing to say, because it's a lot different than what we first heard. I will never curse the ground again because of humanity and their just desperate attempt to ruin things. God curses the ground. Does that change humanity? Did anything change? No. Cain and Abel. Cain kills his brother. Cain curses it. God curses Cain and sends him out into the world. Did anything change? No. Lamech got worse and escalated violence to an even greater level. Did anything change when God wiped out humanity? No. God says, every inclination is still evil of their heart. The curses, the floods, aren't changing humanity itself. So I'm done doing things that way. I don't curse the ground anymore. I'm not going to destroy all life ever again. This is the point of the story. As Israel looks back and knows the God that it worships, it says, how did this God come to be? Flood story. Please don't think that like you're supposed to be worshiping the God pre-flood. I hope you don't think that God will destroy human life, that God is a destroyer of worlds, that God is an uncreator. Not only did he say he would not destroy human life, that he would never curse the ground again, he gives his sign. He puts his bow in the sky. The beauty of the bow is that it's a war symbol. It's his, like, you know how Zeus throws lightning? You know how everything is in the realm of the gods in the sky? Like we talked about this, the ancient Near East. The stars are gods, the skies are God. The rainbow is like God's war bow, his bow and arrow. He sets it down. I don't need this anymore. I'm not doing the violence thing anymore. Unfortunately, we don't like to think about God like that. So we keep telling ourselves stories that he's going to punish us. We keep telling ourselves stories that he's going to destroy the world. We keep telling ourselves stories that he loves to kill our enemies. But the fact is, God has put down his bow with an eternal promise to never pick it up again. Never again will the waters of chaos destroy all life. This new resolution means that God still has his pain, right? That troubled heart when he looks at broken humanity, that troubled heart when violence escalates out of control, still causes the pain and the suffering and the turmoil. But now we see a God who finds a way to fix it with humanity, not over and against humanity. A God who makes a new resolution to, after the flood, enter into the life of humanity. It calls to mind the text of Jeremiah, doesn't it? You have a heart of stone, so I'll give you a heart of flesh. You can't feel you're violent and destructive. I'll breathe beauty and life into you. Because floods and curses and destruction don't ultimately change anything. You could destroy the world day after day after day, and as humanity did its actions again, it would just spiral out of control again. And so God says, we're not doing this anymore. I'm going to be with you in this project. We work together with God to get things back on track. And of course, not to spoil the story too much, but we have to see the connection to Jesus in this. The ultimate divine and human collaboration. Who undoes the curse? Who puts back the waters of the flood? Who brings life and beauty and creativity once again in a way that has never been seen before? So today, remember that God is not a destroyer of worlds. If things are bad for you, they don't just get carelessly left behind. If you have pain, it resides as well in the heart of God. He doesn't destroy with loud floods and violent acts, but works quietly to restore you, to restore people you know, to restore all of creation. He is not a destroyer of anything. He laid his bow down a long time ago. And every time you see it, which is a lot in Florida, right? Every time you see it, tell yourself, oh yeah. And there's no one who's going to pick it up ever again. God, help us to embrace the story of the change we saw in you through this flood. Help us to embrace the same idea in our lives that we cannot force somebody into our way for their life. Destruction of another person is never going to bring healing. Destruction of ourselves cannot bring ourselves healing. Into your chaos, the breath of God stirs black waters. Into your pain, the pain of God stands in solidarity. Into your violence, the rainbow of God stands in an eternal call to peace. Sing with us our final two songs.